Why do some MMO players actively want to suffer? Not just tolerate the grind, not just accept the death penalty, but fight loudly and passionately to keep it. Because when we suggested that Monsters and Memories might be too punishing for long-term growth, about half the comments didn't push back on the argument, they rejected the premise entirely. And I've been thinking about that ever since. Hey guys, Blark here from Zach. Look, this video is not a walk back. We still believe what we said. But the reaction was too interesting to just move past. Because I don't think those players were defending suffering. I think they were defending something underneath it. Weight, identity, and a kind of meaning that's genuinely kind of hard to find anywhere else. And to understand that, you have to understand what friction actually does. Meaning usually requires friction. When death has consequences, survival feels real. When leveling is slow, progress feels earned. When recovery takes effort, your success feels significant. We live in an era of optimization, faster progress, clearer direction, reduced downtime, and efficiency feels respectful of your time. But there's a cost. If everything becomes maximally efficient, nothing feels scarce. And if nothing feels scarce, nothing feels earned. True in games and in life. If you pick up a guitar and can play a song in 10 minutes, it's impressive, sure, but it doesn't feel like yours. The effort is part of what creates ownership. Keep It Harsh players understand this intuitively, and they're not wrong. But there's an even deeper layer here, and it's one people don't always say out loud. Hard systems don't just create meaning, they create status. If death has consequences, survival signals competence. If leveling is slow, max level signals commitment. If corpse recovery takes effort, success signals endurance. Because hardship is a filter, and filters create hierarchy. Whether we like it or not, that's human. If you endure something difficult, you feel ownership of it. And when someone suggests softening that difficulty, it doesn't just feel like a design tweak, it feels like a threat to the thing you've earned. So when we suggested relatively minor adjustments, some players didn't hear tuning, they heard threat. We weren't coming for the hardcore mechanics, we were coming for their hardcore identity. That's a really important distinction, and it's why this conversation gets so heated so fast. But here's the uncomfortable truth on the other side of this. For some players, that same friction doesn't feel meaningful at all. It just feels inefficient. It feels like the game is testing their schedule, not their skill. And that's not entitlement, that's life stage. Think about who plays niche old school MMOs in 2026. It's largely people in their 30s and 40s who grew up on EverQuest and Ultima Online, people who remember what that experience meant. But many of them now have jobs, kids, and 2 hours on a Tuesday night if they're lucky. The mechanic is identical to what it was in 1999. The expectation of what their time is worth has changed completely to them. And here's why it gets practically dangerous for Monsters and Memories. Those players aren't casuals looking for a mobile experience or the next WoW. They're exactly the audience this game was built for. They're the ones who are going to write the forum post and build the wikis and run the guilds and keep a small population server feeling alive. Losing them isn't losing the soft edge of the audience, it's losing the core. So when we talk about the friction line, we're not asking whether the game should be hard, we're asking whether it's hard in ways that filter out the wrong people for the wrong reasons. And this is where the debate goes wrong. It collapses into keep it brutal versus make it easy. But that's a false choice. It assumes meaning only exists at maximum pain, and that's just not true. A level 5 player not dropping full gear on death doesn't erase meaning. Slightly faster early XP doesn't destroy commitment, and a minimal map doesn't eliminate exploration. Those aren't philosophical concessions, they're tuning decisions. The friction is still there, the filter still exists, and the hierarchy still forms. The question was never whether friction should exist, it's just where that line sits. And those are two completely different debates. Here's what history actually tells us about this. Games that abandoned their identity chasing casual growth didn't grow, they collapsed. Star Wars Galaxies is the cautionary tale everyone in the space knows. In 2005, new game enhancements gutted the systems that made the game's world feel alive, chasing an audience that never showed up. The players who were there left, and it's still discussed as one of the most catastrophic, self-inflicted wounds in MMO history. But the other graveyard is just as real and less talked about. Games built around uncompromising hardcore vision have consistently struggled to sustain the population their own mechanics require. A raid that needs 40 people doesn't work with 80 active players. A dynamic economy doesn't function with 200 users. The mechanics weren't flawed, the world was just empty. An empty world, no matter how beautifully designed, is just a very expensive single-player game. Monsters and Memories doesn't have to choose between those fates, but it does need to understand that a living world has a minimum viable population, and that some of its current friction may be costing them the exact players who would be its most valuable long-term community members. So, when players fight to keep the game harsh, when they call others soft or casual for suggesting changes, they're not just defending mechanics, they're defending scarcity, status, emotional weight, and their own identity within the world and the space. And those things matter and they're worth defending. But a living world needs more than defenders, it needs population. It needs the grinders, yes, but it also needs the slightly less hardcore players who fill out the guilds, populate the dungeons, and make the world feel alive. Because if the king sits alone on his throne in an empty kingdom, who is he ruling over? You can defend harshness philosophically all day, but if the systems don't sustain a living world, then even the most meaningful mechanics won't matter.